Today is going to be absolutely extraordinary. Davide is just comes equipped with so many different tools. Being Fortune 500 trained, he is a growth specialist, so many different talents in marketing. You've worked in the health industry across virtually every industry in the business at this stage. So we're going to get so much out of this. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Craig. Really appreciate being here, and thank you for that great introduction. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat and sharing some knowledge and having some fun.
Well, the introduction could have gone longer, but we haven't got time. We need to dive in straight away on this.
Right into it, yeah, for sure.
There is something that I wanted to ask you about. Now, you talk about predictable growth in any economy. How is that working out for you right now with these crazy times over in North America?
Yeah, I think it always a great question. It's something that most business owners and leaders and executives struggle with. What I've seen is, even if you take some of the larger organizations like Fortune 1000, North America's largest companies, most 70% of executives fail within 18 months. And I think one of the reasons for that, and that's a pretty high rate. So we already know 90 to 95% of businesses fail to begin with. Very few make it past a year. Very few make it past 7 figures. Very few make it past 8 figures, and then the number keeps going down below. It's on purpose, I guess, but I believe that the rate of failure is something that doesn't necessarily have to be this high. So one of the reason why you asked about predictable growth. So for example, the business that I'm currently leading, we're right on budget in terms of like what we predicted, what we forecasted. And I think one of the ways to do that, there's a lot of things that go into it, but it comes down to having a management operating system. It's what I call management OS. I think it's really important in order to be predictable. You kind of have to have a good idea of, okay, what ground am I standing on? And having systems and the awareness of both micro and macroeconomic conditions to be able to say, okay, well, what ways could this go? At the end of the day, business leaders, we're not economists. We're not in the business of predicting things, but we have to, as I've said in our business and other business leaders that I talk to, so we have to operate in reality, but be prepared for multiple sort of arcs of reality to come true. So for us, it's about, do we have the right strategy in place? Do we have the right systems in place? And we have the right people in place? And we can kind of dive down each of those. But in terms of being able to be predictable, for the most part over the last 25 years, and now I've been leading organizations and P&Ls entirely since 2008. So I've been through that financial crisis. I've been through SARS. I'm in Canada. So I've been through the first round of tariffs with the US administration and, just be able to respond to those sorts of things, right? So yeah, and I can go down some rabbit holes, but for example, one of the businesses, we only had one manufacturing partner. And if something went wrong with the one manufacturing partner, the risk of your business is exponential. So you have to look at, okay, well, what if? So I did my exec MBA in the Jack Welch Management Institute. And very simply put, I said the role of a leader is to three things: drive sales, optimize cost, and mitigate risk. In a very simple way, very complicated to do it. But in a very simple way, one of the ways you can get to predictability, which is one that a lot of people forget, so I want to specifically answer your question, is they don't think about risk, right? They don't mitigate risk in terms of understanding what's happening in the market, what are things that could potentially happen. Do you have enough cash to withstand your runway? Currently, right now, we're looking to expand our operating line of credit, not because we need it, but because if a couple of bad things happen, all of a sudden, you're going to need a cushion to land on. And so it's sort of always being adaptive and making sure you have the financial resiliency to deal with what might come your way. There's 1,000 reasons why businesses fail, but there really is only one. And that one thing is cash. Without cash, you can't survive anything. So there's a million reasons why cash runs out, but it does come down, and you being a numbers guy, that firsthand. It's really important to mitigate risk to your cash. And again, we can go to so many rabbit holes, but I'll...
Yeah, just perfect timing. Got this burning question. Now, with that cash and that line of credit that you're talking about there, at what stage do you arrange that? Because most people, they think, oh, we've got bad times happening now or coming, we can see something happening about to happen. So then they go off to their bank and their financier and say, oh, we need to. But the financier's already seen what you've just seen 3 months ahead. So they'll say, no, we're not going to extend it.
Yeah, well, usually the best time is when you don't need it, right? So we've been, like, in one of the businesses, with the business I'm running right now, we've been talking to the bank for well over a year. Just the format, we've already got the approval. It's just more, all right, do we want to do it or not? You're exactly right, because what ends up happening is, and we've seen this because I know some other business leaders have tried to get some more capital. You can get it, but the requirements are much more stringent. So all of a sudden, the bank's going to put a lot more covenants on your business. You're not going to get as much as you need. It's going to be a lot more restrictive. So really the best time is when you actually don't need it. So this was something that we actually identified 2 years ago. Not that by any stretch of imagination could we have predicted some of the nonsense that's currently happening right now on the global stage. But it was more about if some other type, because your business always has risk. And so you have to say, well, what if 2 or 3 bad things happen? You know, do you have enough cash in the bank, or do you have enough operating line to withstand it? So, you know, for example, on the current business I'm running now, if a few bad things happened, but we probably had 3 to 4 months worth of run rate, which is kind of crazy. It wasn't enough when I came in. So we had to fix that, while we're riding a high wave.
Okay. So this week you get your finances sorted out. You've got that in place. You saw it 2 years ago. You've been working on it for over a year now to get this across the line. It all happens this week. Does that stop? Or is there a break and then you start that process again? Because what you predicted 2 years ago might occur in the next 6 months, but then you've got to start expecting what's going to happen in the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's a good question. Oftentimes, a lot of companies engage, and a lot of big companies do. The small companies don't. The problem with big companies, and they engage in these LRPs, these long range planning sessions, they predict 5 to 10 years out, which is quite frankly silly. You have a lot of small businesses that do the opposite, that just sort of deal with week to week, month to month. So what we kind of do is we look at our numbers both on a rolling 12 average and on cash and sort of the outlook. We kind of have a 3-year plan, just to have an idea of, okay, which direction we want to go, what strategic shift. Because something take longer to execute, to take 1 to 2 years to develop the strategy and start implementing behind it. So we sort of set a strategic framework, and I call it a framework because it's got to be flexible, because it's just, you got to be able to pivot, right? So COVID happened, all of a sudden that framework goes out the window, or not, or certain things shift. So then what we do is, we do a quarterly sales planning process every 12 weeks, and we review the numbers against that every 4 weeks. So you can have systems in place where you can look at it every day, every week. I think you'll drive yourself crazy. But I think if you look at it every 4 weeks and kind of say, all right, look at it, so you got a quarter, right? And so you've got 12 quarters in 3 years, and you really kind of take it a quarter at a time, right? It's almost like if you're playing any sport, you're kind of taking it. Let's say for football fans, you're taking a quarter at a time. Let's say you're soccer fans like myself, you take it 1/2 at a time. You say, okay, well, now what do we got to do? That didn't work. Or I'm a hockey guy as well. You've got 3 periods. If you're basketball, you've got 4 quarters. So it's a terrible expression, but how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. Same thing with business. I think it's just breaking it down. And so basically how we do it is 3-year framework, analyze it in more rigor every 12 weeks, and review it every 4 weeks, just to make sure have the underlying trend shifted in any which way or form. And that way you're responding within 1 to 2 quarters and not being surprised by things, rather than just sort of reacting, on a whim.
Okay. So to slightly twist this, another skill that you have amongst your many is you are an AI person, AI expert as well in business. So how would you use AI to do some of what you're talking about right now?
Yeah, so I'll step back a little bit, talk about AI. So AI is just a tool, obviously. Many people think they're using it to replace people. People will be replaced who don't know how to use AI. So the best thing to do is understand that it's a super technology, it's a super consultant in your pocket. So in the instance of, so I'll step back from a high level process and then dial down into, let's say, a specific use case. So if we look at it from a process, there's this concept called value stream mapping. Right. So you look at a process, you break it down in 10 to 15 steps, and you look at when this happens, then this happens, when this happens, then this happens. So your audience can Google VSMs, value stream mapping, and you don't really need what I did when I started in my current organization 6 years ago. I brought in a Six Sigma expert. Actually, I've come to learn you don't need to make it that complicated. Because it's really not a manufacturing line, which I've worked on as well too. But when it comes to business and management practices, anyone can kind of quickly learn basic value stream mapping. You identify the steps, and then what you can do is deploy different technologies at each of those little bricks. So imagine you had, 10, imagine you had like, let's say 10 boxes. So anyone who knows VSMs, you'll have a box or you'll have a diamond for an inflection point. There's different things. So when you look at, what are the sales forecasts? So at some point in the process, let's say before you go manufacture a project or change your pricing, you have to do some form of analysis. So in the instance of, let's say you're selling services, you would say, well, what's going on with the demand for my services at this price point? So you might use AI to analyze your sales calls. You might use AI to say, hey, we've charged $10,000 a month and we closed 10% of our sales. But when we charge $7,000 a month, we close 35% of our calls, which results into more absolute dollars or not, depending on your cost structure. So what AI can do can help you spot those trends. However, the mistake is AI can't, I don't believe, as much as I use it, you still need to know how to use it. Like, I'm not a carpenter like my cousin, so you can give me a $10,000 titanium hammer, it's the best thing on earth. It's got laser guides that even hammers the nails for you. I don't know how to build a house, right? So it would take me a really long time to be, dangerous with that kind of hammer versus my cousin, who's a carpenter, that they would be able to put a house up 2, 3, 4 times faster because it guides you perfectly. It hits the nails for you. There's no fatigue, so on and so forth. And same thing with a coating, right? A lot of people use it for areas that they're not expert. So that's why you got to have a value stream map. You identify the process. You identify who's the expert, because in any business, whether you're 2, 3 people or 2, 300 people, someone or somebody or some agency or some software is responsible for something. Once you start identifying it's basically like a PPT, right? Which is the Boston Consulting Group model, people, process, and technology. You kind of just map that out. And then you say, okay, where do we use technology to identify these trends? You set up, you can build your own GPT. There's various softwares, but even on the $20 USD plan a month, you can do a world of amount of work on that. And even build it in for workflows and whatnot. So,
but you can also start by doing, what do the people do? What should the people
that's the first
be doing?
step.
And just write down a position description. Okay. And then you mentioned it's going to replace people, it's going to make people unemployed. Well, go to the person that's doing the role and say, okay, is this what you do? What else do you do that you don't like doing? What do you have to do to get through the week and get through the month? Write it down for me. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to get you a trainer for that $10,000 gun of yours, because obviously you don't know what you're doing there, Davide. So we're going to actually go through and try and eliminate those tasks you don't want to do, that are taking you time, that are boring for you, repetitive. And then another question for you. What do you want to do? What do you like doing? What can you add value that you haven't been able to because you haven't had the opportunity, you haven't had the time?
Yes. I think the key thing you said there is, because I don't believe AI should replace people. I believe it will replace people who don't know how to use it. But I think the first priority is exactly what you said. So I love what you said about the people, because that part of the value stream mapping is who's doing it, how are they doing it, what's the job description. And I've always said, take like a 2-week time study. And I said, okay, imagine how many times over the course of the 2 weeks that you're frustrated and you think to yourself, I wish there was an app for that. And so that's what I've had people start thinking about. I wish there was an app for that. And so to your point, people can identify those pain points. I wish there was an app to do this silly thing that I'm doing that I don't like to do. And then focused on those pieces, because the ideal situation is you double the size of the company without doubling the people, or what most people do, they double the size of the company, keep the same amount of people, they put more pressure on them. And this is why you have so many people that are unhappy and that are sick. I believe that as business leaders, that's just wrong, right? Like we should not be abusing humanity for the sake of business. Like business needs to serve us. It needs to serve, improve cost of living and standard of living, and people have joy. And I think the key thing you said is, like, God forbid someone loves what they do. Like, it's a beautiful thing when you enjoy contributing. So I'm 100% agreement with you, Ed. Get rid of the stuff you don't like. The question I asked them, if there is there an app for that? Write that down so you can get rid of that pain point, and then put people in their zones of genius. Most people are good and they want to contribute and help and be part of something special. So I think it's our job as leaders to unlock that. And if we don't take that approach, I think you're inherently abusing them. And in my point of view, that's just wrong.
And if people don't like doing a task, then it'll fall to the bottom of the list every single time. And most likely, despite the integrity of your staff, they won't do it well. It won't be a conscious thing. It'll be an unconscious thing, but they're not going to do the task well. Therefore, do you really want them doing it in the first place? That's where you should really be focusing, to get rid of those so that your people can excel.
I think when you opened up with the question of predictable growth, one of the ways to get there is by making sure that your people are happy, right? That they're dialed into the mission, they're doing it in an efficient manner, and you empower and equip them to do what they like to do best. Because in business and in life, we always think strategy, structure, people in that order. You always have to go in that order. But you have to behave in reverse. You always have to behave people first. Set up your structure so that it enables the strategy. A lot of organizations will treat their people worse than they treat the machines. Like if I've been in all sorts of businesses, but in manufacturing, there's always a shutdown, there's a cleaning period, there's a maintenance period. Like the machines are well looked after. But yet people are saying people are the most important asset. And you want to work them to the bone with things that they hate, and you want them to work overtime and don't compensate them. It's just doesn't make sense.
And it's going to cost you money as well, by the way. So if people got none of it,
absolutely.
Nothing else out of all of that before, it'll cost you money if you don't fix it. There you go.
It'll cost you a ton of money. Actually, there was a study, I don't remember who did it. I'm going to guess, so I'm not going to bother. But essentially, when people look at the cost of money, because you're spot on, the cost of a bad employee or the cost of an inefficient process or the cost of losing somebody, this cost that you're talking about, on average is 10 times the cost of the person's salary as an impact to the business and lost productivity, lost revenues, lost profit, because most businesses, they're highly interconnected. And so if you have one piece of the mechanism that's out of sync, the domino effect is rampant. So it absolutely costs you money, either in hard cash or missed opportunity. If you miss that opportunity, you now miss the opportunity to have revenue and profit to absorb a potential problem that will show up in 6 months that you don't know about. So the cost is actually real. So when you start playing this out and you start doing like a mind map, it's actually pretty significant. It's nothing to sneeze at. It's about 10x the cost of employees.
Okay, let's try and change this up a bit. You have spoken, from what I've count during this conversation, 4 different types of systems and 5 different tools. It seems to me the most important thing to you, other than people, is systems and processes and identifying those.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Well said. People, systems and processes are absolutely critical.
So you also mentioned that you've been working on balance sheets and profit and losses as well. How do those systems and processes affect that profit and loss from a growth perspective and from an exiting perspective?
Okay, so from an exiting perspective, so let's say you're having a business and you want to eventually sell it. No one is going to buy Davide's corner shop. No one's going to buy Craig's corner shop if it's just you and I or just individually. And there's nothing documented the business is completely related on Craig or me, Davide. It's not really a viable business because it's not a systemized business. You never get goodwill for it because it's very, very high risk that someone could replicate that success that one of us would have. Let's say we own a corner body shop, let's make it up. Versus, so the importance of having a systemized business, from what I've seen and people that I know, the multiple that you will get will be minimum 2 times more than the market average, 2 to 4x. So for example, let's say let's just take, for example, I'll just keep the math simple, $1 million business. And let's say the market value of that business based on the category, whatnot, let's just say it's 1.5. So that $1 million business, it depends if they do on revenue or EBIT. I mean, there's a million ways to do business valuation, but let's just keep it simple on a revenue basis. So let's say the multiple on revenue would be 1.5 up. But that would be on the low end because, somewhat in a category, there's category dynamics. Someone who knows what they're doing can come in and fix it and unlock the value. Versus if you have a business that's systemized, instead of getting 1.x, you can get 2x, 3, or X more, 4.5 times. So this $1 million business, if you systemize it, because it's replicatable, like I said earlier, drive sales, optimize costs, mitigate risk. There's a system in place that enhances your revenue generation. It ensures that it's efficient and costs are optimized and it's predictable. And then from a risk standpoint, someone can come in, not know the business and just kind of run it at a high level because those systems are there, therefore minimizing the risk. So a $1 million business unsystemized and undisciplined, let's say, would get 1 to 1.5 million. And then if it's systemized and professionally run, it's anywhere from 3 to 4.5 million. This is where the private equity world makes a lot. I've been in the private equity world and I've talked to a lot of venture capitals and PE. This is why they go buy a lot of these companies, because they buy these companies with, don't have the defined processes or not. They get them at a discount. So they buy a business for $1 million. They systemize it, install the operating system, the ERPs, and all those sorts of things. And then 2, 3, 4 years later, they sell that business they bought for $1 million, put in a few $100,000, put in a really sharp operator, someone who knows what they're doing, and then they sell it for 5 to 6 million. That is the game of private equity. So they look for those type of businesses and create value by capitalizing on those areas of arbitrage, by systemizing a business because it generates revenue predictably, costs are optimized, and the risk is really low because everything's been documented, versus something that's like a Wild West. No one's going to touch it with a 10-foot pole because it's a celebrity, it's Bob's corner shop and only Bob knows how to run that thing. If Bob's not there, well, Bob wants to retire, no one's going to buy that business, or they'll buy it at a significant discount, right? And therefore you don't get the exit multiplier that you're looking for.
Well, comment to the audience. See, I told you it was good. It's going to be a good session. So we've spoken so far about exiting, AI, people, processes, and systems. We've covered a fair bit here today. Okay, so let's talk about growth. You walk into a business today. You don't know anything about that business. What are you going to do? You've got 2 hours to go through the business. What are you doing?
Well, one of the first things is try to, let's say we take a pyramid perspective, very quickly try to understand, do a high level value stream mapping. So, okay, how is value created in this business? Who's doing what? How's it going? Very quickly sketch out, okay, where are we making money? The other piece that I look for is, okay, where are we losing money? So that's one thing that people don't look at, is they go into a business and they think about growth. Most businesses, knowing or unknowingly, will have leaky buckets. So the fastest way to growth is to stop the leaky bucket. So you kind of look at the P&L, see where you've been making, which profit lines are making money. If there's enough financial details or whatnot, you can do what's called an EVA, an earning variance analysis. And you kind of do that by product line, by service line, see where we're making money, try to understand some of the key metrics in terms of profitability, a cost of customer acquisition, lifetime value, retention rate, depending if it's a software business or service business. The next body of work I would go to, so I would do some VSMs, value stream mapping, just understand at a high level what's happening in this business. Second piece is try to understand, okay, how does stuff get done? Are there any playbooks? Is there any documentation? What's happening? And then the third piece at the bottom is looking at, the critical accountabilities, like who is critically responsible for what, and how in tune are they with the business. The reason you want to look on the people side and look at critical accountabilities and things that are a KPI, key outcome, is I got to figure out who are my winners that I could lean on and who knows what's going on around here. Most time, Jack Welch said this. He said an engineer said this to him, is that you pay for my hands for free, right? My hands you pay for, right? Because they're the engineer, they're the mechanic working on the jet engine, but you get my brain for free. And so the idea there is we often pay people for a specific role, but we never ask them any other questions about, well, what's working? And so by conducting interviews across the organization, you'll probably find those leaky holes, and you'll probably find that Sally is always late or Jim is wasting money on
only got 2 hours. Can you do that in 2 hours?
I have done it in 2 hours. Yeah. Really, really quick. You kind of do these 10, 15 minutes. You kind of pick your key executive, spend 5 to 7 minutes on them. You really got to go really quickly. Can you do a fully in-depth job? No, but can you get enough sense to say, because if you only have a short amount of time, to your point, and I like the 2 hour, because I've done it in 3, so maybe not 2, but the idea is, okay, well, where am I going to put my efforts in a heartbeat? Because it's really trying to understand, I can only do so many things at one time, and where do I think the fastest path to a win would be to either stop the bleed and figure out, okay, how does this thing work and how can we make it grow?
One important thing in that 2 hour period is don't let them stuff you in an office. Got to make sure that you're in a cubicle out with the rest of everyone else, because you said that they're getting your mind for free, but it's your ears that are really going to pay the benefits. Listening into the conversations, the dynamics around you, you just learn so much in the way people use their language, how they are on the telephone to people.
I really appreciate that point. I think you're spot on, because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, they say, so do it proportionally. I think that's kind of the key to it all, is to really, and you really got to dial in, to your point. Like, you have very limited time, and you have to. A friend of mine, Graham, he's super successful consultant, and he said for the first 90 days in the business, you got to ride what's called the idiot curve. Right. So basically, for the first 90 days, actually, he calls it the idiot curve, but it's essentially be a sponge. Don't go into the business and try to be a hero. You might need to make some quick adjustments to sort of plug some holes, set the tone, but try not to go in and blow the whole thing up, particularly if you're a consultant or a new executive, or, you're a founder that just bought someone else's business. Like, you do need to give a little bit of time to do what you said. Make sure you talk to everybody, assess the information, and then carve a path. So essentially 90 days, be a sponge is what his moral of the story is. To your point, listen and then synthesize, because you can only make decisions based on the data you have. So the better the data you have, the better your decisions are, that you can connect them to make a stronger decision that you'll be successful.
I've got a question, but as you were going through that, you started off, you wanted to look at the EBITDA, you wanted to look through the expenses and look for where we were losing money in the business within our leaky bucket. Are there any AI tools that you would have just brought along and plugged in and you would have used to do that?
Yeah, so you can use like ChatGPT Pro, the Pro account. It's only $20 a month. It's not expensive. So what I would do is get as much data as possible. So for example, what I do is I would get the P&L in Excel, combine all my interviews with set questions, use my iPhone. iPhones now, or there's AI transcription, but iPhone does it. Do a voice recorder, click on transcript, put everything into a document, synthesize it, then synthesize it into a ChatGPT. Because what you can then do is build a custom GPT, and you can organize it so that it can only, learn on the data that you provide. What's the strategic plan? What are the issues? You start feeding it information. Now you start having a quick conversation with its ability to analyze trends. So you don't know, based on the data, how quickly, if you needed to do an EVA analysis, it takes time to do this, but ChatGPT can do it in seconds. But you have to also know how to get the data and how to set it up in a way that ChatGPT can read. Because again, it's only as good as what you put in it. So it's also really important to create a specific ChatGPT for that. Then you can deploy different tools. I tend to try to just stick with ChatGPT and then use tools for specific softwares for marketing. There's like Lead Script, and there's all sorts of things to do specific. But at a general level, the ChatGPT would be enough. Or even if the company, for example, is on a Microsoft, you can get for $400, get a Microsoft Copilot license, everything in the entire ecosystem you can unlock instantly. A lot of people don't know that. So you can almost interview the Copilot if they're on a singular ecosystem. We are now on a singular ecosystem from a couple of years ago because I saw this trend being able to come, but it does take time to migrate. So if they're lucky enough to be in a single ecosystem, you can also do it that way as well and complement it with human engagement. Don't ignore people ever.
Fantastic. We've really been through a lot here today. I think people are going to get an enormous amount out of this. How I'm going to do the transcript for this and do the analysis, I'll use AI, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And I do the show notes and the whole 9 yards. So it's our best friend, and it's a pretty unique tool, and the ability to use it for good, I think, is the most exciting aspect of it. So I know we're running out of time, and really appreciate you and having me on here and becoming new friends. Appreciate that.
It's been exceptional. I think people are going to have to go through this video a couple of times just to break it all down. I'm really excited to actually watch it again myself and take some notes.
Definitely chat. We'll definitely chat again, and I'm always available to help if people want, even if you want to do a webinar or something like that, and have an audience, and always be there. Happy.
All your details will be coming up in just a moment, and I encourage everybody catch up, and you just don't know who you're going to meet. So thank you so much for your time. Look forward to it.
Thank you. You too. Thanks so much.